It is my great honor to interview Robin Lithgow today, who is known by many as the godmother of arts education at LAUSD. She was an arts teacher for many years. She was the first theater advisor and eventually became the director of the arts education branch. Her career at LAUSD spanned 14 years. She was then, and I am sure will always be, one of the most passionate advocates for the arts that you will ever meet. I would always love an opportunity to chat with Robin, but today I am especially honored to do so because she has just published a new book called Lessons from Shakespeare's Classroom: Empowering Learning Through Drama and Rhetoric. To get us started, I'd love it if you could start by talking about your time at LAUSD and, importantly, one of your many accomplishments that we worked together on the Arts at the Core resolution.
Well, thank you, Scott. I can't imagine a greater honor than being called the godmother of arts education. I don't know how I got that title, but I love it. I will say the 14 years I spent at LAUSD were such a joy. It was just, I had a fantastic team, and we really felt like we were just funneling joy into the schools. It was just a wonderful, wonderful crowning experience for my education career. And the Arts at the Core resolution was the crown of the crown. It's funny, we lost a lot of ground after Prop 13 and the cutting of, when I first came to LA Unified, every single school had a full-time visual arts teacher and a full-time music teacher. Maybe some of the small schools shared, but in my recollection, that was the norm. Every kid got a music class and a visual arts class every week. And so we've really lost a lot of ground. The Arts at the Core resolution is a beginning, and I hope not the end point, to bring back, full everyday arts for every student in the district, which I think would empower their growth, their maturity, their learning, their social skills, and all of that. But I honor the board for passing that Arts at the Core resolution. That it was, and I do not take credit for it at all. There was a whole team of people working on that. Very proud of that team.
Well, every team needs a great leader, Robin, so take some credit, okay?
Okay,
You deserve it. You deserve it. Let me now ask you to expand on something that you wrote. You said, I believe that we need more performing arts, storytelling, and creative language in our schools. A great deal more every day. And this is not because we need more actors or dancers or musicians or writers, but because we need smarter, more thoughtful citizens.
And I stand by that. And I think the research backs me up. The problem with the research is that they've been looking at research in arts education, which was all funded by people who want to prove that arts education would bring up reading scores, which is, it does, but that's not the purpose of arts education. The research that I found fascinating is research in brain development. That evidence that students physically engaged in making meaning, that's a powerful, powerful element of intellectual development. That's another reason. So the arts produce intellect, they produce empathy, they produce social connection, and all of that has been diminished in our schools with this intense focus on test scores and achievement levels. I feel passionate about the fact that people have to realize that arts are really the motor, the engine of learning. They're not a frill.
I hear you. Now, Robin, I was a Spanish teacher, and I know that you know that I am a lover of languages. I also know that you are very interested in Erasmus colloquies, which were used to teach Latin, which at the time was the lingua franca, or the way in which people from different countries with different languages communicated with each other. Tell us more about why learning this particular piece was so important.
Well, the funny thing is, and this is something that is unique to me, the colloquies were written for conversational Latin, not classical Latin. Students in schools back in that day had to learn classical Latin. They had to read their Ovid and their Virgil and all that. But they also had to be able to chat in Latin if they were planning to travel in business circles or, go into religious services or whatever. If they had any international aspirations, they had to know Latin, but they had to know both classical Latin to read the classics, but they also had to chat and joke and be friendly in Latin if they were planning to travel. So the colloquies were written for the friendly Latin, not the classical Latin. They are not the highfalutin, all the rhetorical figures. They were just conversations. Colloquies have been used for centuries to teach conversation, but Erasmus took a spin on it. The ones that were in existence at the time by Vivus and Corderius and others, they were very things that they would think dutiful schoolboys would talk about. So they're kind of boring. Erasmus comes along and he writes colloquies about horse thieves and prostitutes and corrupt priests, and these were fun for a 10-year-old boy. They read them and they performed them and they laughed about them, and in fact, two of the colloquies lead us right to Shakespeare, one of Shakespeare's very earliest plays, The Taming of the Shrew. And you could put the colloquy, they were written 60 years before Shakespeare was born, but you could put them right into the play and you'd hardly notice that they weren't part of the play. So it's very, very clear to me that Shakespeare not only read them as a student, but probably performed them with his classmates, and that they also created their own versions. And wow. So that play comes right out of the classroom.
Fantastic. Fantastic. But now let's talk specifically about your book.
Yeah.
And that takes us to a Shakespearean Latin grammar school in the 16th century to show us the vast differences between schooling then and now. And you say that it's important to learn about what we lost, what we could bring back to make a difference for our students. Tell us about this.
Well, really almost nothing, but the almost is very important. I mean, their schools were for boys only. They used physical punishment a lot. They had to speak Latin to and from and during school all the time. And it sounds dreadful. It just sounds dreadful. But they had an enormous amount of drama. They were for both in the classical sense and in the colloquial sense. They were on their feet every single day, reciting, performing, and they had to follow Quintilian's rules for performing. They couldn't just mouth it. They had to stand correctly, they had to emote correctly, they had to have the correct gestures. For Cicero and Virgil and those were very impressive gestures, but for the colloquies, they had to really act them out. Mm-hmm. And it was fun. It was just fun. The jokey tone and the foolishness of it was made for 10-year-old boys.
That sounds great. That just sounds great. Well, Robin, finally, I know that in addition to your being brilliant, you also have a brilliant brother. And we all know him from many movies and plays. His name is John Lithgow. But he also played a special role in this book. So tell us about this.
I have never felt brilliant because I grew up with a really, truly brilliant younger brother, younger. So, but he has been He's also a wonderful illustrator. He started out as an artist, actually. He wasn't going to be
Mm.
an actor at all. My father was an actor. My father produced the entire canon of Shakespeare's plays while we were growing up. But John wanted to be an artist, and he went off to Harvard. And in the drama people at Harvard knew about my dad, so they recruited him to. He got a standing ovation, and the rest is history. He never went back, but he is still a visual artist and a wonderful one. And I'm incredibly grateful to him for his. I mean, we had so much fun doing this, just so much fun. It was just a real sibling joyride.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Well, Robin, thank you so much for taking the time to join me in conversation. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you too. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it a lot.